All right, welcome to Mr. Singer's first ever PowerPoint with voiceover. I hope this is as fun for you as it is for me. So we've been talking about the Gilded Age, and this is where we'll start. This is about the time that you decide to take a nap while listening to this, but remember that you are going to have to answer the questions, so please pay attention. This will also help you for your test coming up soon, your 9-week exam, and your EOC at the end of the year. So, why is the Gilded Age called the Gilded Age? What are inventors? Which inventions do you think have been the biggest impact on our lives? Why? How does technology affect our lives? That's question one. Go ahead and take a few minutes to answer that question. Please remember, no copying from friends, relatives, Google, or Wikipedia. Alright, I hope that you paused it and didn't just wait the 4 seconds I waited to answer these questions. If not, please pause now before we move forward. So, the Gilded Age is coined by Mark Twain, famous author of the time, author of Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn. He was a very sarcastic and intelligent man, probably one of the greatest writers in American history. And he said that it was the Gilded Age because everything seemed to be touched by gold. Everything seemed to just work out so perfectly. And looking back, he was absolutely correct. It was a great time in American history. We push Native Americans into frontiers, out of the frontier, and into reservations. We finally tame and settle the Wild Wild West. And so we have the opportunity as we settle the Wild West to decide what we're going to do with it. And industry ends up being one of the biggest things. We have huge changes in technology, fuel, kerosene, oil, coal. With the steam engine comes the capability to really dig deep for the oil that we use nowadays. And for the first time, we get this amazing revolutionary technique in creating steel, the Bessemer process, which allows us to create steel in massive quantities, as you can see by this picture. And that's going to revolutionize the world. We're going to use steel for railroads, plows, reapers, farmer tools, food cans. Eventually, we're going to use them for skyscrapers as soon as we get the advent of the elevator, because no one's trying to walk up 27 flight of stairs, especially with groceries. Major inventions of the time, you all should be doing Facebook projects, and we'll have that posted up, but we have Thomas Edison with his incandescent bulb. And for those who have seen the commercial with the gentleman frying bologna on a bulb nowadays, you could have fried a steak on that bad boy, but it worked. I won't bore you. This is Thomas Edison's shop. You can actually see it still standing today exactly as it was. But what does the electricity do for us? It allows factories to work more hours. You can have factories absolutely anywhere regardless of time of day because you no longer need sunlight. You also don't need to worry about candles because candles weaken human eyesight, and people were going blind throughout history by working into the late hours of the day. So the light bulb and electricity allow us to be more productive. Other inventions include the typewriter, the telephone, the telegraph. Here's the first conversation. Mr. Watson, come here, I want to see you. Of all the things to have made the first conversation via telephone, that was pretty boring. And here's question number 2. Why do we have time zones? What is a union? What is the benefit of having unions? What are some negative effects of unions? And go ahead and pause this and answer those questions. Again, no copying. Okay, hopefully you actually paused that, or you're super fast. So, age of railroads. By 1890, we have 200,000 miles of track. In 1888, more than 2,000 railroad workers are going to die and 20,000 are injured. Most of the railroads are being built by Asians in the West and Irish in the East. You're going to have some African Americans, but understand that a great deal of the very dangerous work was done by Asian and Irish immigrants, mostly to do with dynamite. And once we are done with the Transcontinental Railroad, we're going to ban Asian immigrants because we see that we no longer need them. They are going to earn very little, but at least they could find jobs doing it. And with the advent of the Bessemer steel process and greater technologies, we no longer needed as many farmers, so it's not like they could subsist doing farm work anymore. There's a young lady being helped by a gentleman onto the train. Railroads are going to link the United States together. It's going to help us travel places that we hadn't gone before and really, really increase the productivity of our industry, especially as we increase the amount of railroads in the South. We're going to be able to take the products out of the South and move them to the industrial North to create greater products. We're then going to make those products in multiple factories and bring them together to be shipped in warehouses. This new railroading of the United States is going to be extremely important, but to keep railroad schedules, we're going to have to create this thing called a time zone, and that's where it's a different time in different places in the United States following the movement of the sun. And here we have George Pullman's car. This is where we get the Pullman car, also the Pullman company. It's a sleeping car. You could sit and sleep in that car and it would travel for hours and hours and days, and you could be comfortable. As you can see, super swank with portraits and everything. What's the problem with railroads? Everybody needed them, and railroads knew it. And so they charged high prices. They would bribe government officials, and they're going to make millions of dollars through trickery. And I know that in my class we talked about how the government granted a whole lot of land at the same time as the Morrill Act, M-O-R-R-I-L-L. And the Morrill Act is going to give land for universities dealing with agricultural and technical issues like FAMU, Texas A&M. If it's an A&M, probably from the first and second Morrill Act. But there's also going to be land given to the railroads to expand. And what they're going to do is they're going to sell the railroad excess land to farmers at exorbitant prices at high interest rates, and then charge whatever they wanted to these farmers to ship their goods. And that's going to lead to huge, huge issues, and eventually the formation of the Grange, very important in American history. To combat corruption, the Supreme Court says that they can regulate interstate trade by passing the Interstate Commerce Act. It's really not strong enough to control the railroads, but it is capable of ending some of the corruption. As businesses consolidate into bigger businesses, because now you have the telegraph and the telephone and railroad, so you don't have to be in the same place as all of your business. We're going to start having these businessmen who become extremely wealthy, and we call them either the robber barons or the captains of industry, depending on which side you're on. You're going to have gentlemen who are either going to vertically or horizontally integrate their businesses, and that's going to help them make a profit. At the same time, you have government supporting laissez-faire economics. Laissez-faire means hands off or let it be, which means the government's not regulating much. So businesses can form monopolies and control entire markets and charge whatever they want because there is no government to stop it. So what do we get? We get the idea of social Darwinism, and that's that the best individual will succeed. It's survival of the fittest. Government should do very little and just let society decide. If you're poor, you're meant to be poor, and you should be left that way. Of the robber barons, we have some really famous ones. Andrew Carnegie, who builds a giant steel firm, he buys out all of his competition and provides raw materials and transportation of his goods. So this is considered vertical consolidation or vertical integration. What you're going to do is you're going to take every aspect of your business and own it, so you make a profit all along the way. Another gentleman is John D. Rockefeller, and he is the robber baron that controlled Standard Oil. He buys all the other oil companies. This is called horizontal consolidation. That's controlling competition one step in the process of a product. So all of the oil. um, also known as monopoly. You have Vanderbilt, who was a railroad monopolist, and J.P. Morgan, who was a banking monopolist. They did do philanthropic work, which means they gave money to people, um, but they still believed in the idea of social Darwinism, where you were meant to be rich if you were meant to be rich, and you were poor if you were meant to be poor. These robber barons, again, created monopolies and trusts. Monopolies is where a firm or a business controls all of the competition, and a trust is where companies agree to work together. If you have a monopoly and a trust, you can pretty much corner an entire market all by yourself. And you're going to see this happen between the robber barons, where one's controlling steel, one's controlling oil, and one is controlling railroads. And if all three trust together, they essentially can charge whatever they want for all of their services. So what's wrong with having monopolies and no competition? I don't know. You tell me. I hope you didn't just talk to your computer. I meant write it down. But if you need to pause, please pause now. What does Congress do? It says, no, 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 not today. And it passes the Sherman Antitrust Act to outlaw trusts and monopolies. This becomes really difficult to enforce because it's the first time anyone's done it. So what does government do? Just tell you no, please stop, put that down, don't go there, that doesn't belong to you, that's my purse? No, how do you figure this out? So it becomes very difficult to enforce. You can tell them no, don't do it, but if there's no punishment, is it really going to stop them? What are working conditions like thanks to these robber barons and to the low education of the workforce? Conditions were terrible. 14 to 18-hour days without travel time, sometimes walking an hour to and from work or more. Dangerous conditions. You have poor living conditions, which we'll see in a minute. You have child labor, also known as if you are shorter than 5 feet tall, you labor. To improve conditions we formed labor unions. And we'll talk about that in a second. We're going to find that unions are illegal until 1840s. It's considered interfering in commerce. The Knights of Labor tried to rectify the issues of big business. Most importantly, we're going to find that unskilled and skilled workers alike are demanding reforms for their children. They want safer working conditions. They want an 8-hour workday so that they're not just falling asleep at work, waking up to work, falling asleep at work again. And equal pay for women doing equal work. The American Federation of Labor wanted higher wages for skilled workers and shorter work weeks. Together, they will reform American working rights. We will see unskilled labor starting to get paid more and skilled labor getting paid more than they. We will see mandatory education for children in the United States, ending child labor and child labor laws. How do they get what they want? Strikes. And these strikes usually resulted in some form of violence. We covered these in class, so I won't go over them. Government is going to need to send troops against the unions over and over again, and that's going to ruin unions for the American people. Notable strikes, again, Great Railroad Strike of 1877, Haymarket Square Riot, Homestead Strike, and Pullman Strike. How do business leaders react? Unions were prevented by not hiring union workers, banning union meetings, using the courts and troops to stop unions. Eventually, business became union busting, and they aren't really going to come back for another 45 years. We'll get there. So, more questions? Yes. But only 50 words, not that big of a deal. You could do this. Try it. I hope those were all school appropriate words. I'll read them in a minute. There's another one. I know, back to back. What are you going to do? This is how I do things. Immigration in the United States is going to change from Western and Northern European, wealthy, educated, coming with great purpose, to Southern and Eastern European, coming with also a great purpose but different. They're poor, they're looking for opportunity during America's golden age, and they come mostly from Southern and Eastern Europe again, and for various reasons. Some religious reasons, pogroms coming out of Eastern Europe for Jews, and economic, for the most part, opportunity. So you had two choices really in the United States if you came through: Ellis and Angel Island. We'll talk about each. Ellis Island, as you come through, see the Statue of Liberty on Liberty Island. You stay about 5 hours. You go mental and health tests. You have to pass the health test, that literacy test. You can prove that you can work and have at least $25. 20% were detained for a day or more. 98% are allowed to stay in the United States. And this is what it looks like. It's absolutely gorgeous. Asian immigrants, Chinese and Japanese that come to the United States, are going to come through Angel Island. Japanese went to Hawaii for the most part to work and gradually went to the West Coast, California. Chinese immigrants are going to come to California during the gold rush, and they're going to work on the railroad. It's a lot different than Ellis Island. Harsh questioning, long detention, filthy, ramshackle buildings. You're going to have more sent back than stay. And here's some pictures of it. Go ahead and pause if you want to see them. It's a huge culture shock for immigrants. We're trying to find jobs, housing. You have tenement housing for Americans. Americans are going to treat them poorly because they see them as taking the jobs, taking the housing that's already in limited quantity. How do you survive? Well, you settle in neighborhoods with people from the same culture. Little Italy, China. You have transition be a lot easier when someone speaks the language that you do, that has the same culture that you do, but it slows down assimilation. You have this Americanization movement and nativist movement where you're going to use schools and volunteers to teach immigrants English and how to be American. And nativists are going to say that that's not our job. In fact, that they should probably not have come here in the first place. So we say it's a melting pot here in the United States. It's a mixture of people of different cultures and races who blend together to become American. But most people don't give up their customs, so it might be more like a salad bowl. Yeah, you've got all these different ingredients, but they don't really mix together like food does. It doesn't really mix together like a pot of soup or stew or pie. It's more like you kind of toss it all together and we call it salad. So as we get xenophobia, fear of foreigners, and nativism, the idea that native-born Americans are better, you have a harsher treatment of immigrants. And you say that you want immigration from the right countries: Britain, Germany, Scandinavia. For the first time, you're saying, we don't really want these Latin people or Asians or Slavs. For you to be considered a native, you have to be Anglo-Saxon and Protestant. And we're having these new immigrants, Jewish, Catholic, Slavs, Asians, who don't really fit into what the ideal American is. Then you have anti-Asian sentiments because while the other people have different beliefs, they don't look very different. The Chinese look different: physical features, hair, dress, customs. And so we fear that they're taking away jobs from native-born Americans and from the good old God-fearing white folk. So we pass in 1882 the Chinese Exclusion Act, which bans all entry of Chinese except for students, teachers, merchants, tourists, and government officials. In 1902, we banned all Chinese immigration until 1943. Asians would go to segregated schools, with the exception of Japanese immigrants. A gentleman's agreement was struck up between America and Japan that limited the amount of Japanese that could immigrate, but we promised not to segregate them from population. Immigrants are going to move into the city. It's their greatest opportunity to succeed here in the United States, which is going to produce a rapid growth of urbanization here in the United States, just a horrid growth. And so we're going to have a huge housing problem. You have row housing that's, we'll show you pictures. They're houses built so that they are connected and share walls. You have dumbbell housing, and it's shaped like a dumbbell, includes air vents in the middle. And people are going to use that air vent to dump sewage. And in any very densely populated area, you're going to have an increase in crime. And here you have these dumbbell tenements. And this is where they would dump the sewage into this middle area. Just think about that for a second. Here goes, this is what it looks like. We start to find we need public transportation. Horses are creating quite a mess in the streets, about 10 pounds of poop per horse per day. So we create streetcars and later subways, 1897 I believe with Boston and 1904 with New York. We start to realize we need sanitary water. We probably shouldn't have trash in the street. It's not uncommon to just see a dead horse sitting in the middle of the street and children playing in the street next to it. And so we start insisting on indoor plumbing, sewer systems, water that isn't tapped into the sewer system. Think about that for a second. See? Horse. Kids. Wasn't kidding. So we have fires. Why? You have houses built next to each other and wood, and houses made of wood. So when one fire starts somewhere, everything goes up. Think of a box of matches. And so you have the Great Chicago Fire and the San Francisco Fire that's going to destroy huge swaths of cities. Because of all of this craziness right here, let me show you this craziness again, and the fires, you end up getting these reform movements. And you get people like Jane Addams, who founds Hull House in Chicago. And what that's going to do is it's going to create this community center in the middle of a slum. You find a really bad neighborhood, and it's going to provide education, cultural and social services, meals. It's going to teach people how to be American and how to survive. This is the first real form of charity we'll see during the social Darwinism movement, and this is what's going to kind of eliminate that idea. It's going to start the idea that all people deserve to be respected. Who's going to bring this to the forefront? This gentleman right here, Jacob Riis. He's going to photograph the overcrowded misery that were these tenements. He's going to photograph children working, and as you can see, these children here are barefoot, which is kind of scary, considering that if they just slip, they're losing those toes, and this would frequently happen. Children sleeping out in the streets, poor, children missing fingers, and if they're missing fingers, they can't work, but they're missing fingers because they did work. And so this is where those child labor laws really become extremely important. And these photographs will outrage writers and start the progressive movement. Here we have some more of the housing, a whole house education going on. And all of that's going to push this big social movement. You have the women's movement, where we want suffrage. That means the right to vote. Temperance, no alcohol, which will pass here in the United States. Help for the insane and poor. You can have Susan B. Anthony and Miss Stanton push for suffrage, and that will pass after World War I. Wyoming becomes the first state to allow women to vote. Then you have Colorado, Utah, and Idaho follow suit. For racial equality, you have two big names, and you really need to know these guys: Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. Booker T. Washington is going to say that it's very important that African Americans improve together before racial equality, whereas W.E.B. Du Bois is going to say we need equality now. Don't wait till later. Give it to me right now. But most men will push education. They will. And here they are. You have Plessy versus Ferguson, which I know I've talked about in my class, that decides separate but equal, that makes segregation legal in the United States. And you're going to have Jim Crow laws that separate public and private facilities. We've talked about Jim Crow to death, so I won't bother you about it. But the other real major social reform we'll talk about in this presentation is the emergence of the political machine. It was an organized group that controlled the activities of political party in the city. And very famously, Gangs of New York talks about this. It's a great movie. Please get parent permission before watching it. How does it organize? You're going to have a boss. He's the political leader. And it's kind of like a pyramid. At the very top is this city boss, and he controls all the jobs. Police, fire, sanitation, city government. He's going to try and help immigrant problems. And so he wins the immigrant vote and loyalty. And what is he going to do then? He's going to put them in these jobs. He's going to ensure that these immigrants are doing well, and they're going to ensure that he continues to get elected. And they're usually going to be extremely corrupt and steal from the government. It's kind of like a mob. You have to go through the boss to get things in the city. New businesses, licenses, inspections, money for schools, hospitals, anything you wanted. The machine would get it done for you. But you had to grease the wheel first. You had to pay him first before he'd do something for you. So to keep the machine running, you would falsify elections. We're talking about back in the day. You can put the names of a dog, a child, dead people. How would they know? You just put it into the ballot. You would start getting more votes than registered voters, but they'd pay off the right people and it would work out. The machine would choose a worker that contracted for a government job. The worker would charge more than necessary and a kickback fee to the political machine. So let's say it was $100 to get a business license. This worker would charge $125. He would keep 10, give 15 to the political machine, and $100 would go to the government for their fee. Boss Tweed, the gentleman here, is going to steal the equivalent of $250 million from the state of New York. He becomes one of the most powerful bosses. He headed Tammany Hall in New York, part of the Democratic Party. Tweed is going to pocket over $200 million, like I said, and it's not until newspapers finally attack him that he's arrested and jailed, and the government starts to clean up these political machine areas, although they do stay in pockets in the United States, even to this day. So here's the major politics, and I want you guys just to go through this, the major politics here in the United States, and to make sure that there's no kind of spoil system here in the United States. We created the Pendleton Act, and that requires anyone trying to get a federal job to fill out a test, and that makes sure that they can actually fulfill that job that they're being given. And here's some more out of the Gilded Age. If you guys have any questions, please don't hesitate to tweet and or message me. I hope that you have enjoyed this presentation and it helps you guys out so we can do more fun things in class instead of stuff like this. And don't forget to turn in your writing assignment. Thank you so much. Have a good day.